holding up their Jack and Pepsi.
I'm there for the pack out. You just got to pack me in.
Committed to the boat early on. Like, I love getting close and putting a.
You cover a range of stuff on here too, right? Like,
we call this the THP World Headquarters.
You know, my grandpa Roy Weatherby.
I came into like that golden little pocket where there was like 4 or 5 different bowls. Just
You're Canadian? We're doing a Canadian podcast.
My name's Stuckless.
I'm Robbie Denning.
Rob Denning.
How's it going, Ashley?
It's going pretty good, man. I'm busier than a one-arm paper hanger, but it's fine.
Don't really need to introduce you to the listeners out there. We have Ashley on again from High BC. Yeah, you've been having a crazy killer season, man. Why don't you tell the listeners what you've been up to? And
yeah, sure. I did it different this year. I got some animals. So last year was the toughest year in at least 10 for me, and this year's been the opposite. Actually, I've been able to. We kicked it off good. We had a stone sheep double on opener, which was pretty special, and it's kind of a funny story. I ended up getting the exact same sheep I airballed last year on film for everyone to see. So. It felt like a little extra redemption there and kind of a neat story. And then we went up north again for a moose hunt. It was a moose caribou combo hunt. I had the caribou draw. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to close the distance on one of the bulls that we think was probably legal. But we ended up doubling on the moose on that hunt. So we're 2 doubles, and then ground out about 5 weekends of muley hunting and got myself just a decent, a pretty respectable little mule deer there.
Yeah, man, I watched that episode that you put on YouTube. Epic, man.
Yeah, I've been I've been doing a lot of work on my editing, sound design to try and make things more watchable, a little more entertaining, but still keeping the element of just taking people along for the hunt and keeping it pretty down to earth and casual, even though in the background I'm just, a maniac with technical specs for the gear, and then, the technical side of editing and stuff. It's been an amazing learning curve. I'm somewhere in the middle of it still. Maybe I'm starting to feel a little bit of a growing confidence that I understand what I need to do and what I need to get better at. And it's just good to know your problems and I can zero in on them and not be sweating some of the stuff that I didn't understand, even 12 months ago kind of thing.
Yeah, I can't imagine just filming hunts and editing and getting the right shots to tie the story together. That'd be a daunting task, that's for sure.
Yeah, and learning tricks of how when you don't have good bridge footage or good dialogue in the field to help you transition, what are the techniques a guy can do to make that happen?
Yeah. Well, the reason why I got you on here is because of all that success you've had this past year. It's the last episode we did kind of like the whole gamut of like choosing the right rifle, caliber considerations into recoil, weight, just the starting like of the building blocks of how you choose the right rifle for your application and the types of hunting that you're going to do. And that's really what we're doing. We're doing this long range kind of like series as we kind of evolve. We're going to go through the different topics, and you're my main guy, man. Like I'm looking at your setup. It's vastly different than what I'm running, but that really interests me. Like I'm not typically a chassis guy. I've messed around with them a little bit, but that's why I got you on here. Just kind of, talk us through, your experiences using a chassis rifle. Like I know you like you and Fierce are super tight. You have tons of different rifles that you're using, but what I was really looking at is your selection of a chassis rifle this year. Kind of walk us through your setup, Can you give us kind of an overview of your barrel in action? What were the key factors that you took into consideration when you're making that switch from a traditional stock? Because I would imagine that'd be quite different.
Yeah, it was different, and I pretty much have been a like originally a traditional sporter style stock shooter guy, and then would look for something with a little more palm swell, but still a little
Hmm.
raked out grip, a little more standard sporter, maybe a slightly modified from old school sporter. And I had good success. I had a Seiko 7 Ram Mag that was, it was a really solid gun,
Hmm.
and it had a fairly traditional stock lines. And then once I introduced into, still more traditional carbon stocks or whatever, but more traditional, but with modern grips and adjustable cheek rest, that was sort of the gateway that really showed me the benefits of, how much better I could load my rifle up,
Yeah.
applying real good consistent shoulder pressure, lean into my bipod, and really feel set. And when you have that sporter grip with your hand cranked back, it feels like you're pulling straight back, but there's just so much. So, like, you kind of learn in reverse. Once you slowly evolve to get to the vertical grip, it you really realize the shortcomings of some of the systems you used before. So, I was using my rival, which has pretty much a vertical grip,
Hmm.
and then we had looked at this Mountain Reaper in 6.5 Creedmoor for my wife, for her hunts. And then I started handling this chassis, and it just instantly, I was like, oh wow, yeah, this has the geometry I'm looking for and adjustable cheek rest that I'm looking for. So then that just was playing on my mind. Like all of my kills were done with my rival with that sort of vertical grip, more traditional style stock this year. But
Hmm.
in the background, I was working on sort of, okay, what's the moves I got to make to move towards a chassis system? Because I always looked at them as too modern looking, and kind of spoils the the element of some of the things in the film that I like.
Hmm.
But when it really comes down to it, I'm technically minded, and once I got it, I was like, okay, this is worth diving into. So I took my Fierce Rogue in 7 PRC, and MDT had reached out to me, so I was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to work with you guys." The funny thing is, the timing's good. I've been playing with this Mountain Reaper that my wife has here, and I've been loving the chassis.
Oh
And
yeah.
and they're like, "Okay, well, what do you think about setting up with one of our Hunt 26 chassis? It's light." And I was like, yeah, okay. It's a 700 clone action, so just plugged right in. We always get these things that are sort of meant to customize things. And when you're putting it together, there's always just a couple
Yeah.
things that really bug you, that, it's fit and finish of this, or,
Yeah.
may, and I swear, and, you know, this thing, it just was absolutely perfect. And then I was like, getting some advice from some other guys and guys that shoot chassis, and I'm like, okay, like, should I be really considering betting this thing and sort of really getting it to the next level to deaden it right out, or and they recommended, hey, I think you should take it for a test drive before you start doing any modifications. And I'm glad I got that advice, because I bet the majority of my rifles, some haven't needed it, but typically they have in the past. And and I didn't end up betting this because the setup was was very good. I did make modifications. I ordered the vertical grip for it. So the
Oh
grip
yeah.
that comes with it stock is pretty vertical. Like it's 70 degrees or so. So it's pretty raked straight or stretched straight up and down. But the vertical grip that I went to is a perfect 90. And that approach to the trigger was a huge benefit. The length of pull on it was a little bit short because I'm not a super long armed guy, and
Mm-hmm.
I put three extension plates into the length of pull. They came with it. There was four there, but so I sort of felt like the four was too long, and the three wasn't quite enough.
Mm-hmm.
And with the vertical grip, it actually made that extra quarter inch or whatever of adjustment I needed there, and it really fits to the shoulder pretty good. At this point, I have not shot it with the new grip though. At this point, but sometime in the future, I'll get some shooting in with that.
Yeah, it's crazy just the advancements, especially if you have multiple shooters that are using the same main rifle. That's probably the best thing about chassis is how modular they are, shooter to shooter to shooter, how you
Yeah.
can adjust your length of pull. In some cases, you can adjust your hand position, tilting and distance from trigger. Just going back to the betting, do you want to explain to people about the difference is like there's the V betting, and then if you're doing traditional like skim betting and with compounds.
Yeah, so for me, these things are fairly mass manufactured. All the factory rifles that we see, including some of the sort of higher end guns that are off the shelf are still fairly mass produced. So a lot of times you'll get there's harmonics that are going to be created, and it's specifically around the recoil lug that tends to be your enemy, and the pillars or where the action screws come up through sometimes can be a bit of a sore spot as well. But if all that load goes on, your two action screws that are keeping the stock to it, and then you get a vibration. Essentially, it's very
Yeah.
subtle, and not that nothing you feel in your hands because you're under recoil anyway. But that changes the consistency. Typically, sometimes you
Yes.
get one that works out where it actually
Hmm.
cycles the same harmonics over and over, no harm, no foul. If you're really nerding out, I mean, if you want a gun to shoot an inch, I think you got to practice on your personal shooting, and you can get there with most guns, with a lot of guns, without betting. But
Yeah.
if you're nerding in and you want to really chase after that 3/4 minute or that half minute, and pull flyers out of your groups, that's what you got to start needling down on is let's get it bedded. Let's make sure we have clean contact all the way through the action. So yeah, I haven't had to do any, well, maybe a little bit of removal, but just very, very minor filing and stuff. But realistically, I've been adding material, and then it's a bit of an art in itself. I started just using, in the beginning, just JB Weld putty so I could mold it, and then I could get
Yeah.
it down in and just squeeze it hard, and it worked good. But then as I got more into it, I got into the proper bedding kits with the epoxy, and yeah, it takes you got to have yourself a good afternoon with no
Yeah.
distractions, and then you're going to come back to it the next day after you get it set in there. So
Yeah, and take your time, right? I think for the average guy, like you'd be surprised if you took your hunting rifle and you took your action screws out, and if instantly your action is really loose and able to move around a lot, you're gonna have problems, right? Like
yeah, for sure.
contact, not having enough contact to fully support the action, like you're saying, it's going to induce different load and stress.
Yeah,
Firing the weapon is very violent, and all that force, if it's not able to come back perfectly each time, it's going to be different each time. And in some cases, it's enough to shift the way the action interfaces with the stock, and that's where you see really rampant problems. So you'll have barrel
Yeah.
contact, you'll have your action moving around. If there isn't pillars, the same thing. So basically, that's what that especially with traditional stocks, that's what we're looking for with betting. You could take the action screws out and it feels very secure within that stock. You're not able to torque it side to side, front to back. It's not able to nosedive the barrel right out, like basically fall out of the stock. And with some of these chassis now, they've created a lot of innovation and technology around getting betting blocks that are V betting blocks that you bolt them down, you tension them into position, and they're very consistent. It's come a long
Yeah,
ways.
they
Yeah.
bite down. Yeah, I think that was a good point, and I do that, but have been doing this subconsciously for years. But that's a good point. Action screws out, so put your action screws on your bench. If you got your stock in this hand and you grab your rifle by the scope, if it's got a scope, or by the action, put it together, and if you try and enact this vertical motion here, if it's fitted properly, once it's bedded, it's locked in. That you don't
Yeah.
get any noise and clacking in that forward motion, and that means that the whole action and the recoil lug is bedded properly and going to function. And when I put that empty that chassis on, and it was the first time I ever did it. I did do that before and I'm like, I could. That's what I mean about fit and finish. I couldn't believe how tight it was, but I
Hmm.
still thought I was gonna have to bet it, but
Yeah.
didn't.
Obviously, people out there, make sure you're holding on to your rifle so stuff doesn't fall when you're doing that. But just
Yeah,
make
I
sure.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't have a warranty for you, so if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you
Exactly.
do
So,
anything I say,
yeah.
but
Listener
yeah,
advised.
you
Yeah.
you got a good use good judgment, right? You
Yeah.
got to take care of your stuff, but it's not too hard in a left and right hand
Yeah.
to manage that little test. It's not the be all and end all, but it's just something when it fits. It's just made it up perfectly.
Did you have any fitment for the trigger at all? Because that's really the problem area I usually run into is.
These Bix and Andy triggers that are in both my fears, and I don't know. I've seen some people say, "Oh yeah, not good." They've been excellent to me, and I can't say I've shot every trigger under the sun, but I certainly know the difference between pulling the trigger on a 5 pound Browning trigger
Hmm.
that isn't adjustable to what I'm shooting at here, right? Getting it down to that 2 pounds, maybe a hair under the 2 pound range
Hmm.
for the way I shoot. So
What about capability difference? And that's one thing that's always interested me about chassis versus like traditional stocks. Like I'm presuming that's got an Arca Swiss built in,
yeah,
and that's kind of the trend that we see in hunting in general is we're getting like I know my own rifles, like when I redo the barrel, I'm probably going to put a full Arca Swiss rail with a pick rail on the end for detachable bipods and for going in and out of tripods. What's it been like kind of switching to that kind of side of things with your chassis?
uh, it's been eye-opening and extremely positive. Once I was playing around with my wife's Mountain Reaper, I was doing that. It's got an Arca rail on it there. I was hooking up the Arca rail and, from seated position shooting, and because I'm a hound to get prone. Like I
Yeah.
like to be accurate, so I want to get prone. But there's a lot of ground conditions where prone's not going to happen for you, and that was a big aha moment. Now I was setting it up. I've set it up on some of my heavier camera tripods just to see how stable I felt and some standing, and um, it's pretty remarkable. Like that, if anyone is sort of having stability issues with setting up and not necessarily long range, even for those couple 300-yard shots, well,
Yeah.
it really takes a lot of your, that anxious body energy that you're just going to transfer to your gun. It dampens it down because the gun's feeling like it's being sort of held for you, and then you address and get into it. I can really see big advantages. My wife's a fairly new shooter. We were able to get her set up, and right away, the comments are, "Hey, this is a much more comfortable way for me to shoot." And that's someone that shot 30 rounds through a conventional rifle, and then has probably shot 20 through this now. And she's like, the learning curve is so much shorter with that. And then I think with my MDT chassis, the a big advantage of it is that the arc is full length.
Yeah.
And so when you're doing angled shots, sometimes even having and I've been doing a lot of shooting off of a bipod that actually is Arca and Picatinny compatible. That the double pull, I forget what it's called, that MDT have. And the really cool part of that is the ability that, okay, so I have both double pull legs pulled out all the way, and I'm still not at a steep enough angle up to make the shot that
Yeah.
I want to make. As soon as I pull that bipod, slide it right down the rail, and get it back further, it just really allows me to get down. And in the opposite side is when you have to shoot downhill shots, you want to get your butt end as close to the ground as possible. Well, you're not going to really do that off of a tripod unless it's highly specialized and
Yeah.
the setup's going to be janky. But if you got a bipod and you really got the ability to splay those legs out, like when I shot my mule deer this year, I was splayed right out. I'm shooting downhill at 40 or more degrees, so a really steep angle shot, and I was still able to have a rear rest that was basically my puffy that was just in its little stuff sack, and it was good enough to get that angle. So I think your ability to move your center balance for it when it's on a tripod feels real nice if you find the natural balance point of the gun. But if you got setups where you got to go, like I like to play around and practice very difficult shots in the field at range, um, just so when I get called on to have to do that, um, I at least know what it feels like. I know where on that Arca I need my bipod, or where I'd want the tripod to be able to execute the shot.
That's like personally, I don't know how many shots I've taken where if I had a tripod and I could get into a seated position, that would have been a much better, more comfortable shot. Especially if you're on like a steep ledge where you're trying to shoot across like bench to bench and you're
Oh yeah,
forced to
for
shoot off the
sure.
ledge. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to shoot when your feet are higher than your gun, right? So
Yeah.
that's where that would I would presume that would make it so much quicker to get set up, and then you're able to balance the rifle so you're not, nose heavy or tip heavy. You can balance everything the way you need to, and make shots, especially for those like ravine to ravine across valleys, or on steep
It's
terrain.
you true, like that is so accurate. That has always been a shot, and I'm sure a lot of hunters will relate. The cross canyon shot might only be 200 yards or 300 yards. You're down at the bottom of some drainage. That cross canyon shot, when the ground's falling away from you, is very hard to get conventionally, and be very consistent on it, because you're usually looking for a blowdown. You're looking for a big limb. You're looking for some form of support, or you use your tripod and just hold it on there a little bit, and that works. But this is a great use case for when these things kind of show their worth, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
We're just kind of curious. Like on the last episode, we were talking quite a bit about different styles of hunting, and I know like if you're running big glass, you're glassing up game, that's pretty advantageous towards using a chassis gun. And and we're just talking about different magnification ranges and what's your methodology behind the glass that you're choosing? I know you're using heavily Zeiss, obviously, with the show and everything.
Yeah.
But what's your reasoning behind what you're using?
I got a few theories that have got me here. It's been a long road through a lot of different scopes, but I actually right now for the actual rifle scopes, I'm running the V6 3 to 18 by 50s, which I think is a good balance point for weight to performance. I've had some bigger scopes before with nice glass, and I've just, found the balance of the gun out. I think these, when I'm putting together my packages, I'm looking for 8 pounds on the nose, um, plus the bipod outside of that. But 8 pounds on the nose is what I'm looking for, and I'm been able to achieve it with both the V6s. I use the reason the low end of the magnification is important to me is I hunt in grizzly country
Yeah.
part of the year, and I really, when I'm brush busting through, I really want the ability to have a wide field of view and a low magnification. So that's why I don't sort of work on something that gets us up to 6 to 24, although that gives me that nice extra reach in the top end. I feel I'm shooting a lot in low light anyway, and with the 50 mil with the max 18, um, it's really, Zeiss aside, although the reason I pursued a sponsorship with Zeiss was because of these exact V6 scopes. I bought two of them, and then I said, "Hey, I love your stuff, and I wanna work with you guys more." And that's how that relationship was built, and it was those two scopes that made that happen. So, and then when we get into the other optics in the backcountry kit, I mean. I ran a set of 12 by 50 Vortex razors, UHDs, and hey, bang for buck, that was pretty good. But I've gone back to 10 power because that's where I came from before those. The 12s are still good handheld, but really to get the full benefit of them, you're going to run a tripod. And I already carry a lot of tripods with filming and for the optics for the spotter.
Hmm.
So I switched to, and I was super skeptical. Like when I was in a meeting with Zeiss, they're like, "No, we think you're gonna like these." I said, "Look, I'm a snob. If it's not gonna work, it's not gonna work." And they're 10 by 40s. And then I got all sketched out about light gathering and low light, and they're, yeah, and they are amazing, and they're super light. So, been happy with those. Those are, I was talking to them. They were saying they had some other stuff coming out, and I was like, "You're not getting these out of my hands." With a
That's kind of
spotter,
nice when you can
with
love a piece of equipment that much.
yeah, for sure. It's really paired with the rifle scopes, and I think the only pain point I've had with my optic system has been the right size for a spotter. I think
Yeah.
that's been really challenging. Like the Zeiss ecosystem, there's two options, and they're both very big from my perspective for backcountry. So I'm running the Gavia 85, and it's 30 to 60 power. I think 30 power is too high for the low end of your
Yeah, I
spot
agree.
scope.
Yeah.
I struggle with that a little bit because, hey, spotters are great, and we all envision we're looking a kilometer or two away all the time, and we do. But when you're looking at 300 yards to pick up that 2 inch point that makes that mule deer legal, that then it matters to be able to dial it back. I really think that we always obsess about the high end of our optics, the power at the top end, and I think the power at the low end is underutilized because if you've got a spotter on a tripod and you can run it at 15 power, or 20 power, but 15 ideally, and you start gridding specifically for sheep or open country animals, like it's the answer. And I'd give up the top end for that bottom end and just know that I have to get closer to either age the animal or to confirm full curl when we're talking sheep. And then my overall kit consideration is I got 15 pounds of camera gear.
Hmm.
It's so that's sort of been my one pain point that I'm working through. I think in sometime in the future, that's going to change for them, and I'll be excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, it's I found the exact same thing. Like personally, like 30 power as your low end, that's too much eye fatigue for me. I just found that I ended up leaving it at home more than taking it out just because I always could get by with my 10 powers, right? Like
Yeah,
identifying like obviously there's certain situations where you want a little bit extra oomph if you're field judging,
yeah,
but I found the same thing. 30 power low end it wasn't low enough for me.
it's a little
Um,
too much. Yeah,
yeah, it's a bit too much. It doesn't give you, especially if, and this is like this whole discussion, and then the last episode, same thing. It's about understanding where 90% of your success is going to be, right? Like
yeah,
your hunting conditions, we're always thinking about the most extreme. I wouldn't even say just consequences for like having too high of a high end or too low. There's always those compromises that we have to make. But if
yeah,
you frame around all of your gear around 90% of what you're going to be doing, like it's going to be 300, 500 for most hunting situations. If you are going for sheep, that's very specialized. That's
hmm,
something different. But for 90% of like mule deer, elk, you're looking at 500 yards. That's where you really want your gear to be, in my mind, centered around because if you don't have that low end, it's a lot harder for you to gain perspective of where you're spotting too. Like especially if you're using like an angled spotter to
yeah,
refine exactly where you're looking really rapidly to get
yeah.
on those animals and cut them off, you can kind of lose where you're at, right?
You totally can. Yeah,
This is something where I think a lot of guys go overkill, exactly like you're saying with their rifle scopes too. They're looking at 24 power, 25 power. I certainly would say that you would attest to this. You need some serious glass to back up a rifle scope that's going past 20 to 25 power. Like Shots glass work from Zeiss, a
yeah,
lot of this impeccable glass. The clarity goes to shit if you run a inferior optic without the glass quality. Anything
yeah,
above
for sure.
24, you're going to be zoomed right up past and into 24, 25, and it's going to be really blurry. You're going to see a lot of aberrations. It's much better, like you say, to be in that 20 power range at 18, 20, and get
Yeah,
the advantages of the low end where you get good field of view. Are you running a second focal plane or a front?
it's second.
Second, me
Yeah,
too. Yeah,
yeah,
especially if you're running second focal plane. That
yeah,
top
for
end
sure.
really matters because all your holdovers in your reticle are all based off that second focal
All
plane.
based off of that,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, and a lot of people, don't consider that, but wind can start depending on your caliber. I mean, once you start getting out past 350 yards, if it's a stiff breeze, then what that situation is you have to dial right up to 24 or more. I still think 24 is on the reasonable end with high quality glass, but
Yeah.
as soon as you want something that's precise, that's going to get you 24 power, I mean, you're going to be north of $2,000 for sure
Yeah.
just getting in the door. And if you really want to lay it down, then you're looking at 3 to 5 depending on and
Hmm.
there's great options out there, but I just found the sweet spot with these V6s. Like those will be hard to change from in the future.
Yeah, because if you're gonna go to like a 24 power and it's not like you say the flagship models like the Mark IVs, Mark Fives from Leopold, the Zeisses, the Night Force, the Razors are really good, but you got to be careful. Like the PSTs, I'd say maybe go for like the front focal plane option. That way, if your top end at 24 is really blurry or
Yeah,
something's
you can
going
keep
on,
her backed
yeah,
off
you can back it
back
off.
to 12 or 14, and
Yeah,
all the subtensions are still going to be bang on.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
yeah, I've shot some first focal plane stuff. As I get older, some of the fineness and some it's hard to find the exact right reticle as well that my eye likes because they're inherently smaller on the lower end, and then
Yeah.
they keep the scale all the way through the magnification, which is neat magic. But I think I'm second focal plane unless I get a hobby gun for shooting steel where I might consider something different.
Yeah, same. I'm the same way. Like the low end, I just keep it backed off as I'm walking around, so that I can snap shoot and do whatever I need to at close range if you jump something, and then you're just living in that max for all your other shots.
Yeah, and I think a good point to make, just so the consideration is more full. Even with second focal plane, I mean, you just have to start running more math if you're going to go half your magnification, and then you got to realize that everything's going to be doubled for you. So, but you start playing those games in any kind of pressure situation, and you're just adding some recipe ingredients that sometimes lead to heartache for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What about ergonomics? Like I know we talked about, ergonomics versus a traditional stock, but how does that translate into like your weight, durability, ergonomics of the actual chassis? Have you noticed anything like really different about the way you're handling your rifle, you're packing it around? Because to me, that's always been the thing I'm always worried about is, with a drop mag, can it drop out? How am I actually carrying my rifle around? Have you noticed anything different? Is it a folder? Um,
Yeah, it's a folder, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
rock solid, both folded and open. Now, I must say I run a gun bearer from Kafaru there, so I haven't really done a hunt where I folded it and strapped it to my pack. I kind of am pretty active, and I'm always pulling things on and off my pack already. But I think there's a really solid use case, um, for some of those long death marches, especially if you're outside of grizzly country where, there's something really solid about, strapping it either to the side of your bag or directly on the back of your bag, folded, keeping all that weight sort of centered, with the bag. It's, that as a carrying option is pretty slick. However, like I say, I haven't changed my carrying option. What I will say is nothing feels that not one single conventional or modern traditional style stock feels as nice to mount as this thing. These guns are they're really ergonomically, like there's some subtle things that you won't even be able to explain, but your ability to pull up and get a full sight picture, whether you're shooting off the bipod or you're shooting offhand, like the offhand feel that the two guns that I've mainly handled has been really, you really feel ready with it in your hands. It's something about, the way that grip is just when you're holding it, it's got that long, flat stalk to it. And it felt a little foreign in the hands sort of when you got it. And now it's the opposite. My more traditional guns are feeling really kind of awkward and out of place. I promise I probably sat around the fire over the last 5 years a dozen times, cracking jokes about, yeah, this goofy chassis
yeah.
fad thing is just whatever. It just looks cool, but no, it's real stuff. It's really good stuff. So I'm sure I don't have a huge depth of knowledge. I'm sure there's lemons out there and a bunch of crap, and
Just like with everything, though.
Yeah.
But I think if you're selective with this, the ergonomic, the way it actually feels to shoot is pretty neat. It's pretty good, and it manages recoil really nice. And when we looked at it from a weight perspective, my gun, with that V6 on it, with the factory carbon fiber sort of modern grip raising cheek rest unit there from Fierce, was eight. Oh no, sorry, I better correct myself. It was on my Rogue, which didn't have a raising cheek rest. It was 8.01 pounds. I changed the chassis with these. It comes with these cool action screws that were light too. Like when I felt them, I was surprised by them. Uh, but my finish weight was 8.01 pounds, exact same weight. Okay, so it was important that when I made the change that I didn't all of a sudden start because it's easy to drift up to eight and
Yeah.
three quarter pounds and 9 pounds, and it's not much. You're holding it in the shop, you're whatever. Okay, yeah, I can handle this, and then pretty soon, I've creeped up to 10 pounds with
Yeah.
guns in the past just by not paying attention to details, and on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like that magnification in your scope. Everyone's thinking, how light can I go? Can I, I want a 6 pound gun all in. Okay, there's a place for that. And it's a still hunting gun and it's made for in the forest. It is not a long range gun. And I know there's going to be people that'll say, hey, I shoot 500 yards consistently with my 6.5 pound gun.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, let's shoot a group at that range and really see if the consistency's there. Because I think, I've shot light stuff, I've owned light stuff, I've went down the light rabbit hole, and I have not found a recipe for a long range gun that's why I settled out in the 8 pound range.
Yeah,
So
me too. The last episode we touched on that, talking about guys shooting really lightweight, like 6 pound guns with like 7 mm, 7 PRCs. It's you're getting to the point where like, are you 100% with your shots, right? Like that's what we're
yeah,
talking about. We're talking about putting tiny little 5 shot groups, and that's in perfect situation, perfect conditions. What happens if you have a wind pushing you around? It gets a lot more hard to control that rifle um, when you're at 6 pounds. And I'm right there with you too. Like I went down the lightweight rabbit hole, short barrels, lightweight. I'm right back at 8 pounds. I've tried the really heavy stuff, like 10 to 12 pounds. I've shot a couple bulls with those setups, like a McMillan A5,
yeah,
Night
right.
Force 25 power, just real heavy duty stuff.
Yeah.
But that 8 pound, I'm always reaching for that rifle. Like if I got
Yeah.
those two rifles, I'm going for that 8 pound because it's that reassurance of I'm consistent. I'm rock solid. If I can build a shooting platform, like a position, I got him. If it's under 500 yards and you got the horsepower, you can shoot the bigger cartridges to get the shots that you need and the energy downrange. I feel like that 8 pound is a sweet spot for me too. That 20
It,
power scope, 8 pounds, and
yeah.
that's all in. That's bipod, fully loaded up, ready to roll. 8 pounds is where I like to be because I know you are hunting with a lot of people now and camera guys and a bunch of stuff like that. But when you're supposed to be spotting your own shots, it's critical that you can stay in that scope and make your own
Yeah, yeah,
adjustments.
for sure. And that's what you definitely won't do with if you're running a 7 rem at 6.5 pounds. Things really start to plane out in that 7.5 range, and then the sweet spot that I've landed on is that 8 pounds. But and that's without my bipod, so I'm maybe a little heavier than you. When I use my carbon fiber, I have a couple different tripods. I use a Fierce one and a Spartan one if I'm going super heavy, and then I have the double pull for like my winter range hunting where I'm I'm sort of day hunting out of a wall tent. Okay, I'll take the extra weight, and that double pull's probably it's probably a couple pounds, but it's a cool tool for that. It's not a sheep hunting tool. Um, uh, for me because I carry a lot of extra weight, but it's definitely a really cool tool.
And yeah, like all the power to you. If you want to shoot a 6 pound rifle, like we're just saying this is our opinions and this is what works for us. I've experienced the exact same thing as everything that you're saying, Ashley. I've went down those rabbit holes. I've always found I was more consistent at the 8 pound, but just understanding that dynamic, that relationship between your power, your recoil impulse, and your weight, and there's no free lunches. You go really lightweight, it's harder to hold the gun tighter if you need to. But if you are sheep
But sure
hunting,
nice to hike with, right?
yeah,
But sure
yeah,
nice to hike
exactly.
with. And because, you carry around the a 10-pound brick, which I would say again is going to have some advantages over the 8-pound setup, but then you're eating your lunch the other way. So that's where you kind of where's the line, and whether it's 8.5, 7.5, it's somewhere in that range to balance the needs of a hunter and the needs to be able to, you know, take reliable medium to long range shots.
Well, the other thing too is that you're going to have the difference between, I mean, you can weigh in your gun a little lighter, a little heavier, but it also depends on the hunter because we've all seen it. The inexperienced hunter, I think we've talked about it before, they pack their fears. So they've got
Yeah,
everything in their pack. So you can have that lighter gun, but you're carrying another 2, 3, 4 pounds of equipment that you potentially don't need. And we've all been there ourselves, or we know
Yeah.
somebody who has, and you're packing extra stuff. And sometimes there's a time and a place for it, especially if you're just doing day hikes or whatever.
yeah,
But it's like, all right, so the gun weighs 9 pounds or 10 pounds. Really, is it that big of a deal? Because if you shed 2 pounds that you don't need in your pack, you're still packing the same amount. So you might as well just find your sweet spot that you like, and then
yeah,
That's
don't pack
that's
as much extra stuff that you don't need.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
100%.
true. I mean, there's more than one way to skin the cat because, I'm not saying an 8-pound rifle is going to outshoot a 10-pounder.
Yeah,
That 10-pounder has an edge. The part that you got to manage is then what aren't you bringing, or what can you
yeah,
modify on. And, the way this whole industry is built is when we say there's no free lunches, none of this shit's cheap either.
yeah,
It's not cheap to lose 2 or 3 pounds worth of gear throughout your backpack setup,
yeah,
whether you're talking tents, sleeping
Yeah,
pads,
yeah. It all
everything you
depends on the
do.
type of hunting you're doing
So,
for sure.
and same with, these MDT chassis. It's not cheap. It's the cost of a rifle. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's when you kind of really start niching down on what you want as an individual. And typically maybe you're a little older and you got a little bit more
yeah,
freedom, and you save your tokens, and buy once, cry once kind of thing
yeah,
is what happens. But, you know, my first gun's my grandfather's 243. The things, actually it was a very, very accurate little rifle, but still, it don't matter. When I bought my first rifle, and it was like $600 at Cabela's, and a little synthetic jobby with the stock going everywhere. And I treated that thing like I was going to turn it into this ultimate, oh, that I'm going to be a precise shooter. And I
yeah,
really, that was the beginning of learning what it means to dig into it. And then over the next 15 years, I just steadily was going back to, okay, I gotta upgrade to
yeah,
this. And it's you're horse trading this stuff your whole life. It's fun, and you nerd out and you spend too much time. You're looking through stuff, and then I like the technical side, so I'm just nerding right in
yeah,
on details that uh, uh, alone don't mean a lot, but combined with everything, once you really get your perspective, shaved down to the real meat, it all that adds up to building something that you really feel good about when you grab. And it doesn't mean you don't miss, and it doesn't mean you don't
yeah,
screw up, but that's on me. I know if I put the time and effort into setting my equipment up, it's on me. Like that's where and that's where most of the work is, regardless of all this stuff we're talking about. You got to work on you a lot
Yeah.
more than your gun. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with you guys. Mine's right around that 8 pound. I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm sure it's right around that 8 pound range.
Yeah.
And I bet you if you ask, like, you're gonna have one extreme or the other too. Like, but I bet you if you went for the average person and didn't tell them and they just shot guns and stuff like that, like here's some guns, shoot them.
Yeah.
I bet you the average person, and not saying we're going on a long hunt or anything, but just how it feels, I bet they'd all settle close to that range just because it's not too heavy, it's not too light. You know what I mean? It is kind of a
Yeah.
happy medium for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I gave, like, for instance, and this is kind of a unique perspective just of how all these, like, in general, the hunting industry has changed, especially with rifles and setups and weights. And like my father, he's ran, Model 70s, lightweight rifles, 4 power scopes, like my main custom setup, like, it's heavy to him, right? But you got
Right.
to think about kind of the scope of what they were using, right? They were using
Yeah.
they were doing freehand shots, lots of running shots, lots of close range stuff. Maybe 300-400 was the tops, and they're doing holdovers, fixed 4 power. That's going to be alien, but I showed him how to use it. I showed him the advantages of it, of getting prone or shooting sitting.
Yeah.
First time he took out my rifle, he shot a whitetail in the heart at 500,
Yeah.
and he shot his mule deer at 620 yards uphill with a 20-degree
Uh,
incline. Like, that
uh,
is a
Wow.
And he's like,
powerful
I get
capability.
it. And
Yeah,
then instantly
yeah,
he's like, I get it.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
There's a conversion that's converted person immediately with your
Yeah.
dad
Oh
there.
yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
just that capability alone of just the simplicity of, like, you have a little bit of the weight, but realistically, where you maybe shouldn't have been making that freehand shot, even though you did or you could, you are going to have misses. You are going to have to be disciplined with the way that you're diligently shooting that rifle all the time. Being able to utilize, a tripod or a bipod, that's going to be a lot more helpful in the long run with being repeatable, I think. And you can build it into your training regime and how you approach that. Um, the one thing I did want to talk to you about was your experiences with, like, magnums and lighter weight rifles. Like, I know you're running the 300 PRC. So now you're running the 7 PRC. What was the change, and what have you noticed about these new cartridges?
I think so. I was running 300 PRC on a really old school kind of sporter design. It's a pretty modern company, but they just really they have chassis systems in that too, but still they're light backcountry rifles, which are light, the carbon fiber stock and carbon barrel and all that good stuff. So I must have been coming in. Uh, I had a different scope on it, not the Zeiss scope, and I think I was coming in about 7 pounds with it, and I could actually tell that I was underweighted specifically for that heavy a caliber. If I was shooting a 270 or something, I think no problem. But as soon as I combine the power of a 30 cal Magnum uh, with a sporter grip and a pound lighter than what I think is ideal. Um, I I definitely could shoot sub MOA with the gun. Shot many 3-shot groups sub MOA. I really struggled to get a 5-shot group that was sub MOA because the frequency of flyers, and I did bed this gun. I bedded the action. I was really trying to tune it down because, hey, if I could get a 7 pounder to work, I even made my own, which was probably a mistake thinking about it, but I actually modified with super high density foam. Like in the pipeline industry, we use some high density foams for things. And I shaped out a vertical grip, and then I basically I used a little bit of adhesive, but then I really used heavy electrical tape and really sucked that right into the stock, and then I wrapped it with some of that that camo grippy
Yeah.
wrap two-way stuff, just so it didn't look like black electrical tape on my rifle. And I did that because I was missing a more vertical grip. And I think all of those compromises that you make to get it just I that was the sort of straw that broke the camel's back to bring me. I've been a seven rem guy for a very, very long time. I'd say over the last 10 years, I've been a seven guy, maybe even 15 years. Like time whips by, but I've been a seven rem guy forever. And then I've always, when I reload for my seven, I basically was building the PRC load as close as possible. Well, obviously, it's still got the same shoulders of the seven rem and all that
Yeah.
stuff, but I was stretching it out. I was getting a thou off the lands, and I was basically building more like what they're bringing out of the factory there. So I was intrigued to try it, and I've had just great results with it, and I feel back home in seven land. That's where I live. Nothing wrong with 30s. Shot a lot of them. Just have always done better with the sevens. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one thing I've noticed is, people, there's all these fads and trends but realistically, I think this is a good one. The PRC
Yeah.
family is a good trend. You're getting rid of that belt. You're head spacing off the datum line, the shoulder of the case to the head stamp of the case. I feel like that's a much better metric for head spacing just because
Yeah.
it keeps everybody honest. The chamber geometry is correct. Otherwise, sometimes you'll see in belted cartridges like, oh, it headspace fine, but then you're blowing out your cases and
Yeah.
your shoulders getting bumped out, and that's where you get that insipidus head case separation and problems
Yeah.
with brass durability.
I had all that for sure with that same seven. It was there were some cheaters in the tolerance there. I really couldn't put my finger on it. I was trying to I was thinking I was having an issue with a carbon ring buildup out at the mouth of where the brass sort of enters into the casing. And, I'm scoping this thing. I'm, getting information from, my father-in-law is a gunsmith, and sort of I'm like, what is going on with this thing? And,
Yeah.
and then I'm blowing primers on the second reload, and I don't load hot. Like I typically I may have found one gun in the whole reloading of for 15 different guns over the years. I may have found one that liked it up around the max load, but I'm usually well back from that. So
Yeah.
by a couple 3 grains at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because otherwise, I found the same thing. Otherwise, they like to be near the max, but if you're at the absolute max, you get a finicky setup. That's my experience with it. If you can
Yeah.
find a node that's at the upper end, but not quite at max, you're going to have a lot more forgiving setup
Yeah.
instead of being maxed out. Where, say, you want to start shooting in, you know, say like plus 30 degrees Celsius, and you did your load work up at 10 degrees or 5 degrees, you potentially could have problems, right? With high pressuring, or if you're too close to the lands, you know, that was my experience as well, as trying to optimize the case to something that it wasn't. I was seating bullets wickedly far out,
Yeah.
just to get more case volume. When really now I could have just shot a 300 PRC or a 7 PRC
Yeah.
instead of trying to stretch out my 300 Win mag.
Yeah, and I, like when I say I used to stretch my sevens out, I wasn't stretching them out for case capacity because I was still loading backlight. I just wanted a really predictable jump, right? I
Yeah.
wanted that jump to be like turning a screw every time. And I found consistency, but I did reload for some rifles where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do my Seiko load out here and see how close I can get it because everyone's different. You'll have to seat it back a bit or whatever, but to get it to seat real close to the land and a couple guns just just hated that and
Hmm.
I did get pressure signs from it a couple occasions and stuff, some smileys on the back of the case and stuff, but yeah, I had a frustrating year a couple years ago with a gun that I was couldn't get right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all had those where you end up wasting so much time and energy putting 300 bullets down range and just nothing is consistent. Yeah, I dealt with that probably 2 or 3 years ago where just for whatever reason it wouldn't shoot VLDs and hybrid burgers, and it all my other guns have gotten them to shoot just fine. And I'm doing 30 thousandths jump on seating depth just to find some sort of accuracy node, right?
Right, yeah.
So,
Yeah, even with the good stuff, I mean, it takes a lot of work to get things really dialed in for you. And it doesn't mean you got to reload. I mean, I've had some really good luck with uh ELDMs. Like those have been really consistent for factory ammo
mhm.
and lethal. So,
Yeah, that's if you're gonna shoot factory ammunition, that's my go-to recommendation. Check out the Hornady stuff. It's really consistent. The ELDM, ELDXs, they're great, especially for just like forgiving setups. Typically, they shoot pretty decent, like within sub MOA. Some of them you can get them into half MOA.
yeah, for sure. This both my 7 PRCs love the ELDM, and they love it more than the ELDX. If I think it was I did a lot of research. I looked in a lot of what the Gunworks guys are doing and stuff, and then sort of seeing some terminal performance
Hmm.
because always was skeptical on the performance of some of this stuff, and I used burger hybrids and burgers and had good results as well. I mean, you don't want to plow it in the shoulder. You do a lot of damage, and same with the LDM. Your shot placement's going to be critical, but the energy jump by having it being slightly more fragile, that thing's coming apart right where you want it to. And I know we're like I was taught, and a lot of the thing is about retention and mass. Well, I want to set a bomb off on the internals, and nothing will set it off better than my experience with this the LDMs. So yeah, whether that's controversial or not, that's a fact. That's what I've experienced personally, and what I've seen in research. So
Yeah, what it comes down to is what are your shot opportunities going to be, right? Like if you're going to be shooting frontals a lot, close range and timber, you're probably going to want a bonded bullet or an ELD X or something like that.
well, I think yeah, I think that's very important point because I view the world through a mule deer lens,
Yeah.
I love them so much that I build things around it. And on the moose hunt this year, I made the change because just in case I got into a big bull up there, I didn't want to question my decision. But for the sheep this year and for the mule deer, yeah, it's works like a charm.
What's your experience with switching to carbon barrels? I've had kind of some things that I've been wanting to discuss with you about like low development. Like what are you seeing for harmonic whip? and like tuning the rifles with versus like your traditional match grade steel barrels. I've
Right.
noticed the carbons. It's a little different, isn't it? It's a little
It,
bit
it it's
easier, I've
different.
found.
It's easier. Yeah, I think the nodes are a little bigger. It's something with the dampening happening there where you get a little bit of a wider sweet spot. Now, I never really shot bull barrels. I've never owned one. Well, I've shot one a few times with some long range buddies with Murray Clark and them. They got, as soon as I pick up a 12-pound rifle, I realize that's not something I want to hunt with
Yeah,
ever. But then when I shoot 1,500 yards with it and ping a piece of steel, it's like, but wouldn't it be cool if I could? So
yeah,
anyway, my experience is, it's kind of too early to tell overall, other than I have determined that low development, I am able to find and stick and around the nodes a little bit easier. And I don't know exactly why, other than I think there's a dampening nature to that
yeah,
carbon wrap that's on there that sort of really quiets down the harmonic that violence that's going through the whip of a barrel. Um, Somehow it evens it out because inside you got a pencil barrel basically.
yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of been my experience. Um, there I haven't seen a big detractor from them. Um, I think they have some appeal. Like I find it appealing to look at them. I think they fit some of the more modern guns from an aesthetic standpoint, and that matters too. Because if you look at your gear and you get jacked up because the thing looks badass in your
Oh yeah.
mind, whether it is or not, that feeds in towards your confidence, and certainly not. It's not the cornerstone of making you a good shooter. But once you've worked on your fundamentals and shot, and I'm no expert, but I definitely do a lot of mucking around. And once you sort of have confidence that you can do long range shooting, shoot a lot of steel, shoot a lot of cold bore testing in the field, if the thing looks good too, like like the chassis seem too badass to me to begin with. It's
Yeah,
been this progression. First, it's these
yeah,
carbon barrels, and then I'm like, yeah, nah, I'm not that guy. And then I'm that guy. I'm
yeah.
totally that. I'm like all in. Okay, carbon barrel, stick
Yeah,
it through, and yeah, and then it's like okay, and it actually works. That's the punchline, and it doesn't work all the time. So don't get mad if your system doesn't work.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know how comments work on podcasts, but if it doesn't, you can leave one or
yeah,
just
yeah,
come see my YouTube channel and, rain down an opinion over there about what I don't
yeah,
know. And yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's my I've witnessed the same thing. I think carbon barrels they have a place. It's definitely not PRS or real like high volume shooting.
no,
No, but in
no,
in
it
in
isn't.
in the lens of hunting, like I mean, on one of my rifles, it cut the weight by half a pound. That's a
Yeah,
pretty
That's big.
significant weight
that's a big
change.
number. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
that's a
big
really
number.
big number. And I found the same thing. I find that like on my one rifle, I've had three carbon barrels I've shot out, 300 Win.
Yeah,
And what I have noticed is you have a bigger front end node where it's a big whip and it
right,
dampens it. And if you can time it for that one node, you're gonna have a very because what it is it's the time delay when it's changing directions and it
right.
dampens. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah, if you're Xing right at that pause of
Yeah,
directional change, those are the nodes we're chasing around,
yeah,
for sure. And it doesn't have to be straight up and down always, but
yeah,
it's the peaks of those that we're looking for because everywhere else it's swinging.
yeah, exactly. And that the carbon it's more pronounced, but it seems like there's only one really good node that I found. It's hard. You can fish around, you can find some finicky nodes, but versus like a steel, there's multiple nodes you can hit. It seems like there's a little bit more variation. Um, but yeah, I haven't had any issues with any of my Magnum cartridges. Like sometimes you hear horror stories of like the carbon coming unraveled and issues with it overheating. But at the end of the day, if you treat your rifle right, you don't overheat them at the range. Those carbon barrels are sensitive to that for fouling, I found. But some of my most accurate barrels have always been carbons. Just like point 0.1 groups at 100 yards, really consistent. But again, you got to just be careful with overheating them. That's what I found.
Yeah, that's pretty fancy, and that's pretty tight. But I agree, and I think there's a learning curve there for me specifically as well because there's a lot of heat. It takes a while for it to get out to the surface, and then it dissipates heat
Yeah,
quite well. But I
yeah,
think, you get this false sense that if you shoot five quick ones and you grab your barrel, you're like, oh, it's not too bad. I could probably keep going, and really you shouldn't. And
hmm,
I don't know how blown out of proportion we get with overheating barrels and stuff, but I think it's not something you want getting in your head. Once you get a gun that's shooting, you want to baby it. You don't
yeah,
even want to give it that torture test, even whether it'll do something or not. I think a lot of
yeah,
people would say there's a high risk that it will change something for you. It certainly will change in the moment. Like when you got her flaming up, when you're hitting a nice hot barrel, yeah, she's not going to group for you properly, and
hmm,
is going to do some strange things. But yeah, I typically, I do a lot of the range prep and load development if I'm reloading for a particular rifle at a 200-yard range. And I get it to where I know it's printing. I do my ladder testing with the scope. If it hasn't been on the gun before, I just really go through all that paces. And then really, I like to shoot cold bore shots in the field,
yeah,
and I shoot one a day or one a weekend sometimes, but I don't give myself a follow-up shot.
yeah.
If I miss, that's
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 it.
that's like I missed an animal. That was a live fire situation basically out of a cold bore. If I hit the target, within the accuracy required to kill, I'm usually trying to pick something that's got about that lung size of an animal. So I'm looking for real small rocks, and or a little chunk of a rock that's in a gravel pit 600 800
Yep.
yards away. I'm trying to pick that rock, and I only give myself one shot. And then you get back in the truck when you blow one, when you don't do a good shot or your wind calls off, and you get to think about it, just like you do when you're hunting. And then it fires you up. Then Sunday, you're probably going to take another shot, or the next day, to try and get yourself right. But that thinking time between the rounds. So what happens if we sit there and we shoot 10 times or 20 times?
Yeah.
We'll get a couple. We'll hit that rock in the gravel once, and that'll be what we remember, is
Hmm.
is the good one.
Yeah, and it keeps you honest, right? Like it
Yeah,
lets you know what your effective range is. Like if I'm able to make 100% of my shots at 500, I'm gonna get really confident. It's
yeah,
the unknown that's always tricky. Like it's 800, 700. There's a steep wind. There could be an
an
updraft.
updraft,
Those
yeah,
those tricky wind scenarios. That's where, like you're saying, going out there, getting in the backcountry, setting up and using your gear the way you're going
yeah,
to
the
intend to
way you
hunt
use
with
it,
it.
yeah,
It also helps build confidence on, okay, like I'm setting up for the shot. This isn't the first time I've set up in this position, right? Like setting up my tripod, shooting off my tripod, tracking that point of impact. How long it takes for me to set up into shots. I think that's something that, there's these sexy systems that people build and they're just monstrous. These big scopes, heavy duty guns, tripods, but it took them 3 to 4 minutes to set up, right? And like
yeah,
understanding the limitations of that. If we get too range queen, target centric, like shooting just targets, you lose
Yeah.
track of how reasonably you're going to deploy your equipment out in the field. So it's good to do those little mini trips where you go out there, you use your stuff, like because my stuff I used in 2015, completely different. My stuff is more simple. It's more streamlined. I want things that I can use on multiple systems, cross-platform, like where I can put my rangefinder on, I can put my spotter on my Arca Swiss, I can put my rifle on it. I want things that uniformly all use the same support systems as far as
Yeah.
like tripods and all this stuff together,
Yeah.
and not being super reliant on technology to the point that if one piece of technology goes down, I can't make a shot. I need to have all these backups.
Yeah, you know, it comes with experience that we all still continue to gain every year. I get lessons that I thought I've learned, and I learn them a slightly different way, a slightly deeper version, and but you get really a lot better with time at understanding where you're hunting. If you're hunting somewhere new, okay, there's a little bit of desktop can help you sort of understand the type of shooting system or shooting situations you might find yourself in. But once you're going back to areas for, 2 and 5 and more years later, you can really dial in site specifically of what you need to efficiently hunt that area. And there will be a few scenarios that won't work out. But you'll be super efficient at whatever system you choose, whether it's a tripod, it's
Hmm.
open country, bipods are good. You're going to be shooting at a rock, so bipod's going to be good, yada yada, whatever that may be. And that's where I say when I appreciate a light gun. Um, is when I'm carrying it and I'm gonna have, out to 200 yard, maybe a 300-yard shot, but I'm still hunting. And I don't still hunt much because it's super dang hard to film as a solo. Like I
Yeah.
film 90% of my stuff alone, and still hunting is a and I don't use GoPros because I hate the way the footage looks. So, I'm stuck with compromising on the type of, because sometimes I'd like to still hunt because I see the right activity through the trees. Maybe predators have pushed them back up into the trees, and I know I could hunt it effectively, but I can't film it effectively, so I don't pursue that way because I am trust me, if I was starving to death, and there's a lot of times I don't get the kill on film, so it's not like it's filming or nothing. It's still real. I still want to make sure I have my winter food supply from the
Yeah.
field. But I can do it without having to still hunt usually. So
I think this is a perfect time to ask, and I was going to ask it right at the end, but just getting that sense of how you're hunting. What is your perfect mule deer setup? If there was the optimal setup, you can only have one setup, tip to butt, what are you looking for in a rifle? What are your components? What's your caliber? What's your go-to?
so I'd stick with the 7 PRC because it's been a long road to get back to the sevens or a 7 rem. I mean, realistically, both would be my choice as far as the caliber goes. I think over this last year and getting into the chassis system, yeah, I say it now and something I'm like a raven, something will flash, you'll catch my eyes and I'll probably give something a try. But
Yeah.
I really think
We're all there.
the build out of this MDT chassis on that Fierce gun with a 20-inch barrel, which, yeah, sure, I'm gonna give up. I don't know the exact math on it, whether it's 50 feet per second per inch or something like that. I think I've heard. So I'm giving up some velocity, but I've never been a huge velocity guy anyway. Like I shoot my sevens anywhere from 2750 to 2850, 2880 was a sweetheart Remington load that I had for velocity that it just loved. So, I don't push things super fast. So that's what I'm gonna fuel it with. I really, if we're talking mule deer specifically and we're talking 3-day hunts, I'm gonna take the weight penalty on the because if I can pack 70 pounds or 65 or 72 pounds into sheep for 24 kilometers in before I set up base camp, I can run, 40 pounds of equipment on a weekend and still feel pretty like I'm pretty light and comfortable. So then I am going to run that double pull bipod for mule deer specifically or weekend hunting specifically. I just like the different shot angles I get and I haven't found a better scope than the scope I'm running, the V6 1850. And it was a long, long road to get there, and I'm probably not even there right now, but it feels like, between it feels like both those, let me put it this way. If you held a gun to my head and I knew I was going to have a high potential of having to reach out 500 yards, I go with my rival right now, my carbon stock rival over my chassis because I have 600 rounds through it. I
Yeah, that
I just
confidence.
absolutely believe in it. But I don't think anything feels better than that Mountain Reaper in the hand, even though I've never hunted with it, or this MDT chassis or the chassis systems that I've been exposed to. So I think that's where we're gonna go, where it's gonna be, mostly chassis for the mule deer hunts, probably for the sheep hunts as well, just because, yeah. And my ideal setup when I think about it holistically from filming, I like to set up I have to select a good shooting location, and I'm looking for that 300-yard little bowl or little
Yeah.
lookout area that I can really work because I feel 300 yards it's it's super I'm super reliable even on my worst day, and that's important for confidence. And then I couple it with that sets up for a good filming scenario because I typically will then have a mule deer that's not going to be spooked or alert to my attention, although sometimes surprisingly they definitely are, even
Yeah.
at 300 yards. And then I have to be able to glass from there, and I like to be patient then. And because I am sort of setting, I'd say it's equivalent to the elaborate guy with every jangle for his gun,
Yeah.
only some of them happen to be lenses and cameras. And so once I find those spots and with experience in areas, I'll reset up in the same spot over and over. And then in the off season, I'll go to that same spot and I'll do some test shooting right there, live
Yeah.
fire scenario and test it. And then I love long range. I'm not trying to kill things long, like 300 is probably the beginning of what people consider long range, what I sort of consider long range. And realistically, from my perspective, if everything was 300 to 200, I'd be super happy.
Hmm.
But reality is, the animals don't read the script, and sometimes you have to be able to reach further. So I train a lot to be able to do that if I need to, and it continues to be a learning experience. So yeah,
Well, Ashley, it's always a pleasure having you on the show.
Absolutely.
Um,
likewise.
yeah, it's always awesome hearing your journey because you're like we all go through our seasons. We always learn new things. It's really awesome to hear the successes that you've had, especially with the show and just everything you're doing. It's really interesting. Why don't you let the listeners know where they can see what you're up to with the show and social media and
Well,
where they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, there's some cool updates. Well, I've signed for a second season on Wild TV, so you can catch me there. Where this was all born from, and where it continues to be the main spot that I share is the High BC YouTube channel. So if you just search up High BC, you should see me there, and then. IBC Hunting at YouTube or on Instagram as well. You should be able to find me. It's high_BC_hunting. And without the underscores, you probably won't find me. But with them, hey, ta-da, you're there.
Yeah.
And the coolest thing that that's happened recently is I was in discussions with Wild Sheep Society BC, and I'm re-editing the highs, which if anyone's seen it, it's last year the 2023 was called the lows, 2024 is called the highs because lows no sheep, highs two sheep. Uh, I'm redoing a 20-minute edit of the entire thing. It was a two-part thing that I released on YouTube, and it's going to be a 20-minute film in a screening room at the Summit for Conservation. So
Awesome.
I'm pretty excited and proud to that that they're going to give me that opportunity. So
What a
Good for
great
you.
story. What an
yeah.
awesome story of redemption.
Congratulations.
It's a good one, man.
It
Like I,
is.
I don't care. I don't, it happens to be mine this time, but it just is a good one, right? Like to miss to miss a chip shot too, a 200-yard shot sitting there for half an hour was really hard to carry with me for 366 days to come back at 10 o'clock the following year. It was 10 o'clock on opening day 2023. I airballed that guy at 200 yards and 10:20 or whatever on opening this year. I got that same ram at 5:15 or 5:35, one shot, and it was mine. We knew he was chipped before we had our spotters and my telephoto lens. I packed that 6 pound camera lens, 24K back. That's not recommended. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's where to find me and what's going on. And yeah, could I appreciate any support that I get. I'm working as hard as a guy with a full-time job can do. Right after this, I'm just gonna keep going on an edit I'm working on right now. So that's me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Okay,
guys,
guys.
take care.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Have
have
a
a
good
good
one.
night. Bye.